Hello and welcome back to another We Ourselves video. And today I want to talk about the new Disney Plus Lucasfilm show, The Skeleton Crew. And no, this isn't a review of the show. I'm going to do a separate video of this. But what I wanted to talk about is a problem with the character of Wim, or basically the show's lost protagonist. Now, recently I was watching a video over on the first Kiro's site, and it was one on Finn from the Star Wars Sequel Trilogy, and how he felt that the way that Disney and Lucasfilm went out of their way to write Finn out of the movie, or to write him into the background so that he would not be the protagonist or one of the protagonists going forward, it had a detrimental effect not only on Force Awakens, but with The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. And I totally agree with him, because Finn started out as one of the main protagonists. He was the motivator. He was the one that had everything going. He's the one who had a connection with everybody, from Kylo Ren to Rey to BB-8 to Poe to Han Solo. He was written originally, as he was originally conceived before they casted him as a black person. He was supposed to be one of the main protagonists along with Rey and Kylo Ren. But once he was cast, Disney went out of its way to write him into the background. And because of that, the Star Wars Sequel Trilogy suffered. Likewise, I feel the same thing has happened with Skeleton Crew, because we start out with Wim. And at this late date in the process, I feel like they called him Wim because it's one letter away from wimp. But I'm not going to talk about that in this review. Like Finn, Wim is our point of view character. I just want to talk about Wim being the lost protagonist for this show. I've been teaching screenwriting and writing for a long time. I teach it to adult students. And it never fails that within every class, there's at least one person who comes in and they ask me this question: do you have to have one protagonist? And I always tell them, yes. Now, it's true you can have co-protagonists, kind of, sort of, but really you need one protagonist, particularly if you're writing a movie, because as I tell my students, it's limited real estate. You have limited time. You have to have that story together, and it has to work, and it has to click. TV shows are different, and there have been other teachers who have said that because of shows like Friends, where it seems that everybody's a main character, and other shows, a lot of students question having a main character. Even if they're not writing a TV show or a series, they're writing a 2-hour movie, they still come with the mentality. And when they push back and they don't necessarily do it, I know what's going to happen, or I know what's already happened if they've already written their screenplay or their story or even their novel. They don't have those key character transition moments and milestone moments that drive the story forward. When you have a protagonist, then you know where everybody else in the film and the story fit in as secondary characters, as helpers or as hinderers or as love interests, what have you. And even in TV shows, you typically have a main character. They are the driving force of the show. Ahsoka was about Ahsoka. The Mandalorian was about The Mandalorian. Even when you get to season 2 of The Mandalorian and you have all these other cameos, the show is still about him and Baby Yoda, or Grogu. The Acolyte, as bad as it was written, the show did revolve around the twins. Andor is probably the most perfect example of a Star Wars show. We're comparing apples to apples. It was about Andor. Yes, you had brilliant performances, brilliant writing, and you had all these other character stories going on around him, because it's about the start of the rebellion, and it's about the Imperial services getting wind of it and the activities that they do to try to stop it. Yes, you have all those moments, but everybody's story in that show revolves around Andor. The actions that they are taking, the things that they are doing, they are happening because Andor puts everything in motion. He's the center. It's excellent writing. If you ever need an example of how to do it, particularly if you're talking about writing your own TV show or your own movie and you have that question in your mind, do I need a main character? Yes, you need somebody who pushes the action and the plot into motion. Wim was that character. In the first 2 episodes, we start with his life. We almost see At-Aten from his point of view. He is the one that finds the ship. He's the one that brings the other people there. He's the one that actually hits the buttons. He's the one that gets everything going so that they can start their adventures. But once that happened, Lucasfilm does to Wim the same thing that they did to Finn. They write him into the background, and by doing that, the story suffers, particularly when it comes to the kids. There's an unevenness in the show when you had Jude Law on there and he's doing his things with the other adults. His scenes are always good, but until this recent one, which was number 6, which was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, you finally got some really good dialogue between two of the characters, Wim and KB. When you get to the second episode and Fern assumes the lead and she takes over, then what happens is you lose that protagonist story that was Wim. And my fears have come true because in the beginning, they show him so focused in on that Jedi game and Jedi lore. They show him and Neil having a lightsaber fight before they go to school. And I said, if they don't give a payoff for Wim focusing on that game to the exclusion of his schoolwork, again, a horrible visual for brown and black kids. If they don't have a payoff, then this is going to be bad. And they don't, because they did not allow him to remain the protagonist. So when it comes down to him in episode 5, finding a lightsaber, knowing immediately what it is, and knowing how to activate it, but yet somehow he didn't know which way was up on a lightsaber. Out of all the kids, Wim should have been the one to know which side of a lightsaber was up. But of course, they wrote him as being bumbling, and he messes up and he ends up activating it. It's upside down. He drops it. That he should have had that thing held right side up in a more or less, Jedi pose, at which point then Jude Law could have told him to be careful with it. That's what you would have done if you had left him as the protagonist. That way in episode 6, when KB thanks him for helping save her, and she says to him, thank you, Jedi, it would have had more of an impact because you would have seen his character development and what it means and the significance of him focusing in on that Jedi type thing. But they don't do that because they wrote him into the background, which is why I said I now know why he's called Wim, because it's one letter away from Wimp. Don't get mad at me. I didn't write this stuff. I just really wanted to quickly come and say that because when I watched that video by First Okiro about how they sidelined Finn in the Star Wars Sequel Trilogy and how it hurt the overall trilogy because they took that needed character moments away from him, which was needed because he needed to play off Rey and Kylo and everybody else. When they took that out of the movie, it left Rey as a non-protagonist. But I see the same thing happen with Wim. He is Skeleton Crew's lost protagonist. He should have been the main character, the protagonist of the kids. Then once you had that, then the other ones, Fern and KB and Neil, could have been positioned around him as side characters or secondary characters. But because Disney has this problem with writing black or brown men and boys as lead protagonists, they did the same thing to this poor kid, and because of it, not only does his characterization suffer, but the entire show suffers. So anyway, I just wanted to come and talk about that. And again, if you're a new writer and you're thinking about writing your own movie or your own novel, please trust me. You need a main character. I've seen it happen too many times where people go way down the road. They have an entire script written, they have an entire novel written, and now they're faced with having to go back and do rewrites. And that's the last place you want to be, to have to go back and do massive rewrites because you did not start from the beginning by having a protagonist and having that protagonist go through those key moments throughout your story. Trust me on it. I've seen it happen too many times. But anyway, that's what all I wanted to talk about. Skeleton Crew and the lost protagonist, which should have been Wim. So anyway, hit the like button if you haven't, subscribe and share, and I will see you in the next video.